The morning sun filtered through the tall oaks, casting golden beams of light over the sparkling creek. The protagonist, Emma, had always found peace by the water. It wasn't just a creek to her. It was a part of her, a symbol of the quiet life she had fought so hard to create. With every ripple that danced across the surface, she could breathe easier, her mind calmed by the natural symphony of birdsong and rustling leaves. It was her sanctuary, the one place she could escape the chaos of the world. But on this morning, as Emma stood by the creek, her peace was shattered. The crisp, cold air carried with it an unfamiliar tension. A letter, crisp and official-looking, sat on her porch. At first glance, she thought it was just another piece of HOA bureaucracy, some trivial reminder about lawn maintenance or fence heights. She sighed, rolling her eyes, ready to toss it aside. But then she saw the bold, underlined title. Urgent. Safety violation. Immediate action required. Her pulse quickened as she unfolded the paper, reading the words that followed with growing disbelief. The Homeowners Association has identified your creek as a safety hazard. Due to concerns about potential flooding and erosion, all natural features surrounding the creek must be cleared immediately. Failure to comply will result in substantial fines and further legal action. Emma's heart sank. She glanced at the creek, its clear waters gently winding through the grass, surrounded by vibrant trees. How could something so beautiful, so peaceful, suddenly be a safety hazard? She could barely believe it. The creek had been here long before any of the homes had been built. It was part of the land itself. Safeguarding it felt like a personal responsibility. But the HOA wasn't interested in her feelings. Their orders were clear. Clear the creek. Furious, Emma stormed inside to grab her phone. She called her neighbor, Sarah, who lived just a few houses down and had always shared her love for the creek. "You won't believe what the HOA is doing," Emma said, her voice tight with anger. "They're claiming the creek is a safety hazard. They're tearing down everything." "What?" Sarah's voice was as sharp as Emma's. "But it's been here for decades. This is insane." The two women quickly agreed to meet. As Emma hung up, her mind raced. What had happened? Why was the HOA suddenly so concerned about the creek now? There was no flooding, no damage, nothing that would warrant this kind of action. Was this some twisted form of control? Her thoughts were interrupted by a loud mechanical sound. At first, she thought it was a car passing by. But the noise grew louder, throbbing, roaring. And then she saw it. A massive bulldozer appeared at the edge of her property, its bright orange warning lights flashing. Her breath caught in her throat as another bulldozer rolled in, followed by a fleet of trucks. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. The machines, towering and monstrous, were headed straight for the creek, their metal jaws opening wide. The men inside the machines didn't even glance her way. They were already too far gone, following orders. This can't be happening. Her stomach churned with the weight of the reality before her. Without thinking, she sprinted down her driveway, racing toward the machines, shouting for them to stop. The workers paid her no mind, their focus solely on their task. Her voice cracked as she yelled, "Stop! Stop! You can't do this. That's my creek." But they didn't stop. They kept coming, bulldozing the land as if it were nothing more than dirt. Trees fell with a sickening crack, their trunks tumbling into the creek, and the once peaceful water was disturbed, its flow now choked with debris. Emma's mind screamed for her to do something. Anything. But she was paralyzed by the enormity of it all. The HOA's wrath had come, and it was impossible to stop. As she stood there, helpless, a chilling thought crossed her mind. This was just the beginning. The creek was more than just a beautiful feature to her. It was a symbol of everything she stood for. And now, it was being destroyed. But Emma wasn't the type to back down. As the bulldozers tore through the earth, she swore one thing above all else. She would not let this go. The battle for her creek, for her home, was only just beginning. and the HOA was about to find out that Emma wasn't someone they could intimidate. Emma couldn't tear her eyes away from the destruction unfolding before her. The sharp hum of the bulldozers vibrated in her chest as they pushed forward, their metal teeth scraping against the earth, tearing up roots and crushing bushes that had stood for years. The creek, once so serene, now seemed to be gasping for air under the weight of the machines. Emma's feet were planted firmly in the dirt, but her mind was reeling. She had always known the HOA was overbearing, but this was something darker, something sinister. The workers didn't acknowledge her, didn't even look her way as they continued their work with ruthless efficiency. She could feel the anger rising within her, boiling beneath her skin. How could they destroy something so beautiful? Wasn't this her land too? And why now? Why the sudden urgency to fix something that had never been broken? Her heart pounded as she glanced back at her house. The rest of the neighborhood was still asleep, unaware of the havoc that was being wreaked just beyond their fences. Emma's mind raced. She couldn't let this go on. But what could she do? The HOA was powerful. Everyone in the neighborhood knew that. They had their own legal team, a group of wealthy individuals who controlled the neighborhood with an iron fist. And now they were using their power to bulldoze her home, her peace, her life. Suddenly, a voice broke through her thoughts. "Ma'am, you need to step back." One of the workers, a tall man in a yellow vest, had approached her, his expression impassive. His voice was almost robotic, as if he had said these words 100 times before. He didn't care about her outrage. He was just following orders. "Step back," Emma echoed, her voice trembling with rage. "Step back. You're destroying everything. That's my property. That's my creek." The man didn't flinch. He simply gestured toward the bulldozer behind him. "You'll have to take it up with the HOA, ma'am. I'm just doing my job." Emma felt her chest tighten. This wasn't just a job for them. It was a power play. The realization hit her like a slap to the face. The HOA wasn't interested in fixing anything. This wasn't about safety. It was about control, about forcing their will on the neighborhood, one piece at a time. And now, the creek, the heart of the community, was the next target. Her legs felt weak, but she steadied herself, narrowing her eyes at the worker. "You don't get to destroy this," she muttered, more to herself than to him. "I'll make sure of it." He turned his back and returned to his machine, leaving her standing there, shaking with fury and helplessness. She knew, in that moment, that the battle she was about to fight was much bigger than she had imagined. The HOA's reach extended far beyond their bureaucratic control. They had the power to change the very landscape of the community. But Emma wasn't backing down. No matter how powerful they were, she wasn't going to let them erase everything she loved. She had to act. She quickly turned and sprinted back to her house, grabbing her phone from the kitchen counter. The numbers she needed were on the tip of her tongue. Sarah's number, and then the local news station. There had to be something she could do, some way to stop this before the entire creek was destroyed. She wouldn't let them take it from her without a fight. As she dialed Sarah, her hands shook with a mix of anger and determination. The phone rang, then clicked. "Emma, what's going on? I heard the bulldozers. I need your help," Emma said urgently, her voice tight. "They're already here. The HOA, they're tearing up the creek right now, right outside my backyard." "What? Are you serious?" Sarah's voice was sharp with disbelief. "I'll be there in 10 minutes." Emma ended the call, feeling a surge of hope. But as she looked out the window, the bulldozers continued their relentless march. The damage was already being done. She had to stop it. Somehow, someway, she had to stop it. But how? The HOA was organized. They had the resources. And here she was, one woman against an entire system built on control. She wasn't even sure where to begin. As the sound of the bulldozers faded into the background, Emma made a decision. She wouldn't just fight the HOA. She'd find out the truth, the real reason behind this sudden, destructive action. And when she did, she would expose them for what they really were. It was time to turn the tables, time to make them regret underestimating her. The calm of the creek was gone, replaced by the harsh roar of machinery, but Emma felt a spark of something deeper, the beginning of a war she intended to win. The next few hours passed in a blur of motion, Emma's mind racing as she tried to make sense of everything that was happening. Sarah arrived shortly after the bulldozers had moved farther down the creek, but it felt like the damage had already been done. Trees lay like fallen soldiers in the wake of the heavy machinery, and the creek itself was now nothing more than a muddy, jagged mess. The peaceful, flowing waters were almost unrecognizable. "Emma, this is insane," Sarah muttered, her face pale as she took in the destruction. "How can they just do this?" "I don't know," Emma replied, her voice tight, "but I'm not going to let them get away with it." The two women exchanged a determined glance, but Emma could see the doubt creeping into Sarah's eyes. Sarah had always been supportive, but even she seemed to realize the enormity of what they were up against. "Look," Emma said, taking a deep breath. "I need your help. I can't do this alone." "Of course," Sarah responded, her voice resolute. "What do we do?" "I need to talk to the neighbors," Emma said, her tone suddenly focused. "I can't fight this on my own. If the HOA is going to bulldoze the creek, they might as well bulldoze the entire neighborhood. We need to rally everyone we can, make them see what's really happening." But she trailed off, the weight of what she was about to suggest hanging in the air. "We need to know exactly what the HOA is doing. Why now? What's their real agenda?" "Okay," Sarah said, already reaching for her phone. "We'll talk to the others, get them on our side. But you need to be careful, Emma. You know how powerful they are. They could crush us before we even get started." Emma knew she was right. The HOA wasn't just a group of well-meaning neighbors. They were a system of control, backed by lawyers, money, and influence. Emma had always suspected something wasn't right with the HOA, but now it was clear. This wasn't just about safety. There was something deeper, something more calculated, going on behind the scenes. The two women set out, knocking on doors and gathering signatures. As they moved through the neighborhood, Emma was struck by the divided reactions she encountered. Some residents were just as outraged as she was, ready to fight back. Others, however, barely seemed concerned. A few even seemed relieved by the HOA's actions, echoing the same line. "Well, they're just trying to protect us from flooding, right?" That was the line that HOA had pushed, the one they had used to justify their invasion of the creek. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more, something hidden beneath the surface. As she stood on a neighbor's porch, trying to explain the urgency of the situation, a thought crept into her mind. What if it's not just the creek? What if the HOA was after something bigger? Land? Development? There had to be more to this, more than just a concern for flooding. The feeling of unease grew as Emma left yet another house, her shoulders sagging under the weight of the divided community. How could they fight something like this when they couldn't even agree on what was happening? Sarah caught up to her, her face drawn with worry. "Emma, we need more than just neighbors. We need evidence, proof that the HOA isn't being truthful about what they're doing." "I know," Emma said, her mind already racing, "and I think I know where to find it." She had heard whispers around the neighborhood, rumors of backdoor meetings, of shady figures connected to the HOA who might know something about the real motive behind the destruction. And she had a hunch that if she could find the right person, the right piece of information, everything would make sense. But the clock was ticking. The bulldozers were still up there, still tearing through the land, and every moment she wasted was another moment the HOA's grip tightened. The more she thought about it, the more she realized, if she didn't act fast, the creek might be the least of her problems. "Let's go," she said, her voice now sharp with purpose. "I need to talk to someone. Someone who knows what's really going on." The suspense weighed heavily in the air as Sarah nodded, her expression grim. The battle was just beginning, but Emma wasn't ready to lose. Not yet. Not when the truth was still out there, waiting to be uncovered. As they walked away from the porch and back toward Emma's house, the sky darkened, and the heavy feeling of anticipation hung over them. They were walking into unknown territory, and they didn't know what they would find. But Emma knew one thing for sure. Whatever it was bigger than the HOA, bigger than her creek. It was about the truth, and she wasn't going to stop until she found it. As Emma and Sarah walked through the quiet neighborhood, the atmosphere felt heavier, darker. The sun had slipped behind a thick layer of clouds, casting everything in an eerie gray light. Emma's mind was spinning. She could feel it, the sense that they were on the verge of uncovering something monumental, something that would change everything. They made their way to a small weathered house tucked behind the rows of pristine cookie-cutter homes. It was the kind of house that no one ever seemed to notice, a place where secrets could hide in plain sight. Emma had heard rumors about the previous owner, an older man named Mr. Klein, who had been a local historian of sorts. He had lived there for decades and knew more about the neighborhood's history than anyone. When he had passed away, his belongings had been sold off in an estate sale, but there were still whispers that some of his research remained hidden in the house, the key to unraveling the HOA's real motives. Emma knocked on the door, her heart racing. A moment passed before the door creaked open, revealing a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a cautious expression. It was Mrs. Klein, the late Mr. Klein's daughter. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but guarded. "Hi," Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm Emma. I was wondering if you could help me with something. I'm looking for any documents or records that might shed light on the neighborhood's past, particularly about the creek." Mrs. Klein studied her for a moment, as though weighing her request. "The creek, you say? That's a strange thing to ask about. We're trying to figure out why the HOA suddenly decided to bulldoze it," Sarah added, her voice firm. "We think there's more to this than they're letting on." Mrs. Klein's eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, Emma thought she might turn them away. But then, something in her gaze shifted, like a door had cracked open in her mind, revealing a long-buried memory. "Come inside," Mrs. Klein said softly, stepping aside. "I think I know just what you're looking for." The house smelled of dust and old paper. The walls were lined with shelves filled with yellowed books and photographs, the kind of artifacts that seemed to carry the weight of decades. Emma followed Mrs. Klein through the dimly lit hallway, her footsteps muffled by the old carpet. They stopped in a small room at the back of the house, where piles of boxes were stacked against the walls. Mrs. Klein motioned toward a dusty stack in the corner. "My father kept everything. Documents, maps, records. He was obsessed with this neighborhood's history, especially the land around the creek. If there's anything that can help you, it'll be in there." Emma's pulse quickened. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. She and Sarah immediately began sifting through the boxes, their hands brushing against yellowed papers and brittle maps. It didn't take long for Emma to find something that made her stop cold. A thick, leather-bound folder labeled Creek Development Project. Confidential. With shaking hands, she opened it. Inside were blueprints, detailed blueprints of the entire neighborhood, including the creek. But these plans weren't about conservation or protection. They were about destruction. The creek was to be diverted, rerouted, and the surrounding land developed for commercial real estate. But what caught Emma's eye most was the list of names at the bottom of one of the pages. Investors. Big names. People who stood to make millions from the destruction of the creek. "Look at this," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. This isn't about safety. It's a real estate deal." Sarah leaned over her shoulder, her breath catching when she saw the names. These people, they're the ones behind the HOA. They're the ones pulling the strings. Emma's mind raced as the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. The HOA wasn't trying to protect the community. It was trying to profit off it. The creek, once a symbol of life and nature, was now just a piece of land to be sold to the highest bidder. Her heart hammered in her chest. This was worse than she had imagined. The HOA had been hiding this for years, using the guise of safety to manipulate the residents, to line their pockets with money while destroying the very heart of the neighborhood. "We have to stop them," Emma said, her voice sharp with determination. "We can't let them get away with this." But as she turned to look at Sarah, a new realization hit her like a cold wave. This wasn't just about stopping bulldozers from destroying a creek. This was about exposing the conspiracy that reached deep into the heart of the community. A conspiracy that, if revealed, could destroy the HOA's grip on the entire neighborhood. And Emma knew that once they exposed the truth, there would be no turning back. The stakes had just gotten much higher. The fight wasn't just for the creek anymore. It was for everything they had ever known. But with the truth in hand, they had a powerful weapon. Now they just had to figure out how to use it before it was too late. Emma's mind spun as she carefully slid the blueprint back into the leather folder, the reality of what they'd just discovered sinking in. The creek wasn't just a casualty of negligence. It was a deliberate target. And the people behind the destruction. Powerful, untouchable. The investors, the HOA, the entire system was rigged. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the folder in her hands. "We can't keep this to ourselves," Emma said, her voice a mix of anger and determination. "We need to show the community. We need to expose this before they finish the job." Sarah, still reeling from the discovery, nodded grimly. "But how do we get this information out there? The HOA has everyone in their pocket. It's going to take more than just a few signatures to stop them now." Emma stared at the folder. The names on the blueprints weren't just wealthy investors. They were power brokers, real estate moguls, and well-connected businessmen who had the means to shut them down before they could even start. But there had to be a way. There had to be a way to take them down. "What if we went public?" Sarah suggested, her voice tentative. "We could take this to the press. Get the media involved." Emma shook her head. "The press is too easy for them to control. They'll spin the story however they want. No, we need something they can't ignore, something that'll make people pay attention, no matter how much money the HOA throws at it." Suddenly, a thought struck Emma, and her blood ran cold. She remembered something from the research she had done years ago, before she'd even moved into the neighborhood. There had been rumors about the HOA's history, a history that had been conveniently buried by the developers who built the houses in the first place. If they could find proof of the HOA's early deals made under the table, it might just be the smoking gun they needed. "Sarah," Emma said, her eyes brightening with a renewed sense of purpose, "I know where we can find more information. The archives. There's an old library downtown, the one no one uses anymore. It's filled with records from before the neighborhood was built. If we can get our hands on those, we can prove the HOA's corruption, its illegal activities. We can expose everything." The plan formed quickly, and within the hour, the two women were on their way to the library. Emma's heart was racing, the excitement of the idea fueling her. But with each passing minute, the reality of their mission set in. If they found what they were looking for, they would be going up against an empire. The HOA's reach stretched far beyond the neighborhood. It touched every facet of the city's politics, business, and media. Exposing them could turn the community upside down, and expose Emma and Sarah to a level of danger they hadn't even begun to comprehend. As they arrived at the library, its towering stone walls loomed over them like a fortress. The place felt abandoned, its dusty windows and cracked steps betraying the passage of time. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old paper and forgotten memories. The flickering fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Emma and Sarah made their way toward the back, where the old archives were stored in rows of heavy file cabinets. Emma's hands shook as she pulled open the first drawer, her eyes scanning the yellowing folders for anything that could help. The silence in the library was suffocating, and every creak of the floorboards beneath their feet seemed amplified in the stillness. Time felt like it was slowing down, the weight of the moment pressing in on them. The further they dug, the more they realized how deep this went, how deep the corruption ran. Then, as Sarah pulled open another drawer, Emma froze. A folder labeled Creek Land Development, Pre-Construction, stared up at her. It was thick, the pages inside visibly aged with time. Her hands trembled as she grabbed it, her breath shallow. This was it, the key. As she flipped through the pages, her eyes widened in shock. The documents were even more damning than she had imagined. The HOA wasn't just involved in shady land deals. They had been complicit in an elaborate scheme to funnel millions of dollars into private hands, using the destruction of the creek as a pretext for massive illegal construction projects. There were forged permits, kickbacks to politicians, and backroom deals that no one could have imagined. This was far worse than Emma had ever anticipated. She slammed the folder shut, her heart pounding. "Sarah, we have to act fast. We've got what we need. But we have to go public, and we need to do it now." As the words left her mouth, Emma realized the full gravity of their situation. If they went public with this, it would send shockwaves through the entire city. It would shatter the delicate facade of the HOA and expose the criminal network behind it. But it would also make them targets. The moment the information left their hands, the HOA would come after them with everything they had. Legal teams, PR campaigns, threats, and worse. "Are you ready?" Emma asked, her voice low and steady. Sarah looked at her, a fire in her eyes. "Let's do it. Let's bring them down." The decision was made. The fight for the creek, for the truth, had reached its tipping point. But Emma knew this was only the beginning. As they left the library, the cold air hit her face, sharp and electric with anticipation. Whatever happened next, there was no turning back. The war was on, and Emma was ready to see it through to the end. The weight of the folder pressed heavily in Emma's hands as she and Sarah hurried out of the library, their footsteps echoing in the vast, silent halls. The documents they had uncovered were explosive, too dangerous to keep hidden any longer. The truth about the HOA's corruption was too big, too monumental to ignore. It was time to make it known. But the clock was ticking, and every second counted. "Where do we go first?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with urgency. "We need to get this into the right hands. Fast." Emma didn't hesitate. She had thought about this moment for days, and now that it had arrived, the plan was clear in her mind. We go to the press, but not just any press. We go straight to the investigative journalist who's been digging into the HOA for months. If anyone can get this story the attention it deserves, it's him. Sarah nodded, her jaw clenched. "And if they don't believe us? We don't have a choice. We've got the proof. They can't ignore it." As they made their way to the car, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The hair on the back of her neck prickled, and she glanced around the street, half expecting to see dark figures lurking in the shadows. It was silly, she told herself. The HOA's reach wasn't that far. But as they drove through the city, the oppressive weight of the situation began to settle in. They were no longer just two neighbors fighting to protect the creek. They were now targets, walking a dangerous line between justice and retaliation. The news station's office was a modern building in the heart of downtown. It looked ordinary from the outside, but inside, it was a fortress. Emma and Sarah arrived just as the last remnants of daylight faded, casting long shadows across the pavement. The building loomed before them, its glass windows reflecting the cold blue of the evening sky. The air felt thick with anticipation. Inside, the hustle and bustle of the newsroom only heightened Emma's nerves. Journalists moved quickly, talking in hushed voices, their phones ringing off the hook. But at the back of the room, Emma spotted him. The journalist who had been writing about the HOA's shady dealings for months. His name was Ben Foster, a tenacious reporter with a reputation for taking on the big guys. And right now, he was the only person who could help them. Ben was hunched over his desk, his brow furrowed in concentration as he typed furiously on his laptop. Emma and Sarah approached cautiously, not wanting to disturb him, but knowing they had no time to waste. "Ben." Emma's voice was almost a whisper, but it was enough to pull his attention away from the screen. He looked up, his sharp eyes scanning them before narrowing with recognition. "Emma. Sarah," he said, his voice measured. "What's this about? I haven't heard from you in a while." "We've got something big," Emma said quickly, handing him the folder. "You need to see this. The HOA. They've been lying, covering up a massive land development scheme. The creek. It's not just about safety. It's all about money." Ben's eyes flickered to the folder, then back to her. His expression remained unreadable, but the tension in his posture was unmistakable. He set the folder aside and motioned for them to sit. "All right," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I'll bite. But this better be good. I've been chasing this story for months, and so far, the HOA's been untouchable." Emma and Sarah exchanged a quick glance, and Emma's heart hammered in her chest. This was the moment. The moment they would either bring the truth to light or disappear into the shadows of a system far bigger than they could handle. "We have proof," Emma said, her voice steady but urgent. "Blueprints, documents, backroom deals. The HOA is behind it all. The destruction of the creek is just the tip of the iceberg. This isn't about flood control. It's about a multi-million-dollar real estate project that will destroy everything we've fought to protect." Ben sat forward, his eyes narrowing as he reached for the folder. "Let me see it," he said quietly. As he flipped through the pages, the tension in the room thickened. Emma and Sarah waited with bated breath, their eyes locked on Ben's face. His expression remained unreadable, but his fingers paused on the blueprint of the creek development. He traced the lines with his finger, his gaze flicking back to them. This is big," he muttered under his breath, his voice low. "You realize what this means, right?" Emma nodded, her throat tight. "We have to get this out there. We can't wait any longer." Ben's eyes met hers. "I'll need to verify this information, of course," he said slowly, his voice cautious. "But I can't just take your word for it. I'm going to need everything you've got. Every document, every lead, every name involved. If I run with this, it's going to blow up. And when it does, the HOA will come after you. After both of you." Sarah inhaled sharply, but Emma wasn't backing down. "We've come this far, Ben. We're not stopping now." Ben paused for a long moment, his fingers tapping against the desk. Finally, he nodded. "All right, I'll take it from here. But be prepared. This will make waves. Big ones." Emma's heart raced as the reality of what they were about to do hit her like a freight train. They weren't just exposing corruption anymore. They were about to set off a storm, one that could unravel everything the HOA had built and everything they had fought for. The battle for the creek had only just begun. As Ben grabbed his phone to make the first call, Emma and Sarah exchanged a look, one filled with determination and fear. There was no turning back now. The morning after their meeting with Ben, Emma woke with a sense of unease gnawing at her gut. Her phone had buzzed all night with news alerts, texts, and missed calls. She knew it was inevitable, but the avalanche of activity that followed their decision to go public was overwhelming. The storm had officially started, and there was no predicting just how destructive it would be. Sarah was already up when Emma arrived at her doorstep, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mix of exhaustion and adrenaline. She didn't need to speak for Emma to know something was off. "We're in deep," Sarah said, her voice hoarse. "Ben's story went live last night, and the HOA, they've already started damage control." Emma's heart dropped. She had known the backlash would be immediate, but she hadn't expected it to be this fast. The media was one thing, but the HOA had resources, influence, and an army of lawyers at their disposal. They weren't just going to lie down and take a hit to their pristine reputation. Emma turned her phone on, her pulse quickening as the notifications flooded in. The first news outlet's headline was unmistakable. "Controversial HOA accused of corruption." Neighbors fight back. The second one was worse. HOA defends creek development, denies allegations of malfeasance. But it was the comment section that made Emma's stomach churn. People were already picking sides. The HOA had launched a full-scale PR campaign, flooding the media with counter-narratives, insisting the allegations were false and that the project was vital for the future of the neighborhood. The community, split between die-hard HOA supporters and others who were still learning the truth, was on edge. "This is just the beginning," Emma muttered, scrolling through the comments. "They're turning the tide on us before we even get a chance to catch our breath." Sarah bit her lip, looking as if she was ready to collapse under the weight of it all. What's our next move? The HOA is trying to bury the story. They'll use every tactic they can to shut us down. Emma paced in a tight circle, trying to think through the chaos. There was no denying that the fight had just escalated to a new level. But they couldn't back down now. Too many people, too many lives were at stake. People who had no idea what was happening behind the scenes, people who still trusted the HOA and believed their lies. "We need more," Emma said, her voice firm with resolve. "We need more than just documents. We need to show the community that the HOA isn't just some faceless entity. This is about people. Real people like us." "How do we do that?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with doubt. Emma looked out toward the neighborhood, the place they had both called home for so long. She had spent countless evenings walking the trails by the creek, listening to the birds, watching the water run. That land was more than just an asset to the HOA. It was part of their lives. It was their community, and they would fight for it. "We organize," Emma said slowly, the plan forming in her mind. "We get the community on our side. We'd hold a public meeting, invite the press, and show them what the HOA has been hiding. But we can't just present the documents and the blueprints. We need real stories, real voices. We need people who will stand with us." Sarah looked uncertain, but there was a spark of something else in her eyes, something Emma hadn't seen before. Determination. "You think they'll listen?" "They have to," Emma said, her voice low but fierce. "If we show them what's really happening, if we make it personal, they'll have no choice but to see the truth." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of phone calls, emails, and frantic organizing. Emma reached out to every neighbor she knew, each call an uphill battle. Some were skeptical, unwilling to believe that the HOA, whom they had trusted for years, could be so deeply corrupt. Others were just plain scared, unwilling to risk their safety or their standing in the community by speaking out. But then there were the others, the ones who had seen the truth before, the ones who had already suspected that the HOA wasn't as innocent as they seemed. Slowly, the list of supporters grew, a network of neighbors ready to stand up for their community. By the time the evening rolled around, the tension in the air was palpable. Word had spread. The public meeting was set for the following week, and the press would be there. Emma could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She knew it wasn't enough to just speak the truth. They needed to make a stand, to show everyone that they weren't backing down. As Emma stood on her porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, a cold chill ran down her spine. It wasn't just the evening air. Something was off. She had felt it for the last few hours. An ominous presence, a sense that they were being watched. She turned, her gaze scanning the quiet street. But there was no one there. Not yet. The HOA had already proven they could manipulate the media. But now they would face the people they had tried to control. The next few days would be a battle, one that would determine the future of the creek, the neighborhood, and everyone in it. Emma's phone buzzed again. It was a text from Ben, and her pulse quickened as she read it. "They're already digging. They'd started clearing the land." Her breath caught in her throat. It was happening. They were running out of time. The storm was no longer just a metaphor. It was real, and it was coming for them all. The news hit Emma like a punch to the gut. The HOA wasn't waiting for the public meeting. They were bulldozing the creek. In broad daylight, without any warning, without regard for the community they had sworn to protect. It was a blatant act of defiance, a message that the HOA had the power to do whatever they wanted, and no one could stop them. Emma stood in her living room, staring at the message on her phone, unable to process the full scope of what it meant. The bulldozers were already parked at the edge of the creek, their heavy treads sinking into the soft earth. The trees that had once shaded the water were being ripped out, one by one. The delicate ecosystem that had taken decades to thrive was being reduced to rubble in a matter of hours. "They can't get away with this," Sarah said, her voice trembling with fury as she watched the live footage on her own phone. "We can't let them just destroy everything we'd fought for." Emma's mind raced, each second feeling heavier than the last. The press, the public meeting, it wasn't enough. They needed more. The HOA had shown their hand, and now Emma knew just how far they were willing to go to silence them. But Emma wasn't going to back down. She couldn't. Not now. "We take it to them," Emma said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "We don't wait for the meeting. We go to the site right now. We stand in front of those bulldozers, and we make them stop." Sarah's eyes widened with a mix of disbelief and apprehension. "You're suggesting we, what, block them? Physically?" "Exactly," Emma replied, her determination hardening into steel. "They think they can bulldoze the creek and get away with it. Not if we stop them. We need to make a statement, show everyone just how far they're willing to go. They can't keep destroying our community and getting away with it." A tense silence filled the room as Sarah considered the idea. Then, slowly, she nodded. "You're right. We've come this far. We can't let them take it all now." The decision was made. Emma and Sarah, joined by a few brave neighbors, rallied together in a matter of minutes. Word spread fast, the message of resistance rippling through the neighborhood like wildfire. People who had once stayed on the sidelines now found themselves standing on the front lines, ready to fight back. The HOA had underestimated the power of a united community. As they made their way to the site, Emma could see the bulldozers in the distance, their engines rumbling like the roar of some great beast. The air felt thick with tension, the ground beneath her feet vibrating with the weight of what was at stake. The first few neighbors had already gathered, forming a small human barricade at the edge of the creek. Their faces were grim, but their resolve was unwavering. Emma could feel the eyes of the world on them. Every step, every breath was a statement. The press was already there, cameras rolling, capturing the moment for the world to see. The HOA's first mistake had been underestimating the power of the people. The second mistake was thinking they could bulldoze their way to victory. She marched forward, her eyes locked on the men operating the bulldozers. The machines were idling, waiting for the signal to advance. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she stepped in front of the nearest machine, her breath shallow with the weight of what she was about to do. "You have no right to destroy this land," Emma shouted, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "This is our home, our community. You are not welcome here." The workers on the bulldozers hesitated, glancing nervously at each other, unsure of what to do. The machine's engines revved slightly, as if testing the waters, but Emma stood firm, her stance unshakable. Sarah joined her side, followed by the others. Together, they formed an unbroken wall of resistance, their bodies the only thing standing between the bulldozers and the last remnants of the creek. The press had already caught up with them, snapping photos and asking questions. The moment was charged with a sense of urgency, a fight for survival against a force that had always operated from the shadows. And now, that force was facing the people it had underestimated. As the tension built, the man in charge of the bulldozers stepped down from his machine, his expression hard but wary. "You can't stop this," he said, his voice flat. "Orders are orders." Emma's jaw tightened. "The orders are wrong. You're destroying something that can't be replaced. It's not too late to stop this." The man looked at her, his eyes calculating. For a moment, It seemed as if he might back down, but then he turned, speaking into his radio. "We're not stopping. We have clearance to proceed. Move them." Emma's heart skipped a beat as two more bulldozers rumbled into view, flanking the first. The situation was escalating, and Emma knew they had only moments before the HOA would bring in more reinforcements, lawyers, police, maybe even private security. They needed something to tip the scales in their favor. Just as the second bulldozer revved its engine, Emma's phone buzzed. It was a text from Ben. "They're pulling out. The mayor's office is involved. You did it." A wave of relief crashed over her as the weight of the moment shifted. The mayor's office had stepped in, realizing the public backlash would be far worse than anything the HOA could spin. Emma looked up at the bulldozer operator one last time, her voice steady but firm. "It's over. You've lost." As the bulldozers powered down, the crowd erupted in cheers, their voices echoing through the now silent creek. The community had won. For now. But Emma knew this was only the beginning. The HOA had been stopped, but their fight for the creek, and for their future, was far from over. With the last rays of sunlight disappearing behind the horizon, Emma finally allowed herself to breathe. The battle wasn't over, but tonight, they had made history, and tomorrow, they would stand ready to face whatever came next. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt hope surge through her veins. She wasn't just fighting for the creek anymore. She was fighting for the future of her community. And this time, they had the power to win.